Hey, before we get started, I want to tell you about something that's changing the game for women in dental leadership. It's called the Empowered Leadership Experience for Women in Dental. It's a 6-month transformational journey for women who are done with burnout, overfunctioning, and trying to lead like someone they're not. This isn't just another leadership training, it's a coming home to your voice, your power, and your joy. If you've ever felt alone at the top or stuck somewhere in the middle, this one's for you. Enrollment is now open. Head to leadhershipexperience.com to enroll. Because real leadership isn't about performing, it's about remembering who you are. Now, let's get into today's episode. Dr. Valerie Woo is the founder and CEO of Valerie Woo Consulting. She coaches female dentists and dental business owners and leads masterminds in helping them lead extraordinary lives and not deal with extreme burnout. Why? Because she started her own practice straight out of dental school over 20 years ago with a $2 million loan and transformed it into a uber successful multimillion-dollar pediatric dental office. She recently sold it to a DSO, still practices within the business, so she has her hands very much still involved in the industry. She has an extraordinary story to tell, and she's also a wonderful and incredible asset to women leaders in dental because she has the lived experience and is still actively practicing in dentistry. So not only does she know what it's like to start your own practice 20 years ago straight out of dental school, completely on your own with a newborn baby, she also knows what it's like to navigate the DSO space, AI, all the tech, and just all the newness of what the dental industry is experiencing in the last several years. She is a source and wealth of information. She's a high-achieving, high-capacity, striving woman who recognizes the beauty in that and also the challenges of that as well. She's an absolute delight, and if you are a woman in this industry, I know you are going to get so much from her conversation because she is so open and so honest about the fantasy of what being a dental business owner is compared to the reality. Dr. Valerie Woo, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm so excited to have this conversation because your story really embodies a lot of what I talk about and obviously what you talk about in your coaching work, but the idea of the glorification of busy, the pressure that women put on themselves to be perfect and put together, and all the burdens that many women carry. And you have a very beautiful story, and you're a testament to finding, purpose and joy and building a life outside of dentistry after you built this really incredible practice and the cost it had on you and your family and yourself physically and all of that kind of stuff. So I want to dive right into it because your story is really inspiring. And the way you're able to articulate, the lessons from your experience is something I'm really excited for people to hear and get from our conversation today. So talk to me about the moment you sold your practice, because I think that's what's really interesting. And you shared that it was supposed to be this really big moment and everyone expected you to feel excitement and joy, but you had a different reaction to it.
I did. It was a process, obviously, to sell the practice. And so we knew it was coming. And so it wasn't a surprise when that day happened. And I'm a big visionary and I think about the future. And so I had this idea that I was going to have all this relief and all this joy, that I sold this amazing practice that I still had the opportunity to still lead and work in. So it wasn't like I was walking away physically, but I felt a loss of identity. It was sort of like I had spent almost 20 years of my life with this practice, and here I am, sold it, and I loved it. And at the same time, that was in 2021. So it's been a good 4 years now that I have been in this search of really redefining who I am, because for so long, that is who I thought I only was. And just a lot of soul searching. And I really appreciated that time of sometimes silence on, like I would go on long runs with no music and just spend a lot of time just thinking about who I really couldn't define who I was without saying that, oh, I'm a pediatric dentist and an owner of this amazing practice. Like that was always sort of the first thing that came to mind. And, I'm currently even working with a mindset coach that I have been working with since 2021, still really defining who it is that I am, because I'm not just that, right? And it's really coming to terms that, wow, there's like self-worth stuff that, as an achiever that you go through, and that your worth isn't tied to those achievements. And so that there's a lot of deep work that I am still working through, but am really being more open and vulnerable to really what was going on in all those years of building a practice.
Yeah. And so did you sell to a DSO?
I did. I partnered with the DSO that obviously I'm still part of the practice. I'm still a leader. I love seeing patients. I don't see patients as much as I did in the past because I'm doing other work. But yes, I did sell to a DSO.
Yeah. And so I really get that, where your whole world is this business and now all of a sudden somebody else is running it. So what has been your experience too, seeing somebody else, running the business that you built? I know that often has a lot of grief and emotion that goes along with it too.
Oh, yes. I mean, it's a partnership, which I love that mindset, that it's not like they're changing all the system, right? So that, we picked a great organization where we truly do partner, and they value our opinions and our suggestions. And of course, it's also a company that we have to streamline certain things. So there's some give and take, and we are heard. So that's why it's a good relationship and a partnership. And what I really like about it too is, I was a small business and now I'm part of a bigger corporation. And so to really see that corporation view of dentistry and just to have a different perspective, I've really appreciated that. And, to even relook at my own business and how that falls into those systems, and how it truly is a business, like, right? It could be, what we do in dentistry is just like any other big corporation, and we deal with the same issues all across the board.
Yeah. So you built this business for 20 years and you started on your own from scratch.
Yes, right out of residency.
Wow.
I worked for another practice. I went to my pediatric dental residency in Boston at Children's Hospital. And I was pregnant with my first child while I was a resident. So I had her first in August after I graduated, and I opened up the practice in January of 2006.
Wow. So you had a newborn and we're building this practice from scratch.
Indeed. No, every time I see my daughter, I always know how old my practice is.
So that sounds like a lot. And so tell me about that journey. Like, what was it like for you in the early years? And, in hindsight, I guess, what did you learn from all of that?
Yeah, I mean, right. It's that saying, you build the plane while you're flying it. Is that right? Is that how you say that? Mm-hmm. It was definitely just one or two steps ahead of, what was supposed to happen. So flying off my seat super fast. I mean, it was, now that my daughter's a junior in college, of course, there's that mom guilt of, gosh, boy, did her journey go by so quickly too. And building that business, obviously my why has always been my family. And so I've always tried to make them the priority when building the business. But of course, there were times where, I had to miss certain things or come late to certain things when it came to my kids. But there was that mentality or this idea that this is what it's supposed to be. And so I don't know where this playbook came out, but it was just sort of, I don't know if it was our generation of starting your own practice meant this. So it meant hustle, hustle, hustle. It meant not sleeping. It meant, going in on weekends. I just thought that that's the way it was supposed to be. And without having any mentors to know, because I didn't have any, along the way in that sense. Of course, along the way, I worked with consultants and coaches that helped guide me, but there was still that sense of if I was going to do this, that I had to have all this grit. And so I had to embody and define that. So I had to look ragged and, carrying my kid, all of my kids, I have 4, grew up in the practice. So I did that whole thing. I nursed all of them, for the whole year. They came to the it was great being a pediatric dentist because sometimes, as I was seeing patients, I would have the little baby Bjorn and they would be in there and I would, because I wanted people to see that this was who I was. And other moms appreciated what I was doing at times. I didn't do it all the time, but if I didn't have somebody to watch my kids, guess who was watching them? My team.
Yeah, being a pediatric office is definitely helpful in that case. And as you're saying this, it's reminding me too, so many women, we feel like we need to have this like exponential suffering in order to earn our income. So it's like we have to prove ourselves even extra if we're doing well or whatever that transaction is. Like we need to go above and beyond. And there's always this really interesting relationship I think many women have with their success, but also money. Like there needs to be it needs to be hard, and if we earn even more than the average folks or whatever, there needs to be some level of suffering involved in it. And I know that was part of my story as well. It kind of that no pain, no gain mentality. And sometimes if something's coming easier or you're in flow or it feels delightful or, easy or fun, then certainly we shouldn't be getting paid for this, right? Because it's got to be painful and it's got to be hard and it's got to feel like work. And so as you're sharing that, I can sort of feel internally, I'm envisioning myself in your situation too, like you really had like this feeling that you needed to earn it,
Yeah. I mean, with the debt, right, with the amount of money that I borrowed, I felt all this pressure. So then that must have equated to I have to work and I can't sleep until until later, rest is for down the road.
the week. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I felt that I had to symbolize that. And I don't know I think I put that self on me, but I don't know where it came from.
Yeah. And now you're helping other women doctors and owners, really trying to help them not go down the same path you did, because in part of your story too is that there was a lot of personal sacrifice and burnout.
Yes. And so I want to be able to show and help other women dentists know that there is another way, that because my path I thought was the only path. I didn't think that, just like what you said, in order to get financially profitable, all those things, you had to do all of these things. It can't be easy, right? There's no way. Like, how is that possible? That's what I thought. And I think so many other women still think the same thing. And I want to show them that there's other ways, that you don't have to suffer and that you don't have to burn out, that you can set boundaries, that no is a sentence.
Yeah, because I know too, being a high achiever and, a go-getter and the striver mentality, it's, the goalposts keep moving too, right? So, I'm sure early in your career you had, I just want to make sure that I pay off this loan, and then you hit that milestone and then there's another milestone and then another milestone. And, I was on masterclass for this course that I have last night, and this woman, Edna, I mean, I just loved what she said, and I've said it a few times now, but we always get stuck in what's next, like the 5-year goals and the 10-year goal, like where do you want to be in the next 5 to 10 years? And we can be very forward focused, but something she talked about was where were you 5 years ago? And I've never personally done that, where I do reflection exercises and gratitude and things like that, but I've never gone back 5 years and did an audit of where I was 5 years ago to really acknowledge the growth, right, that I've experienced in the last 5 years. And it doesn't have to be milestones in the sense of career, financial, or anything like that, but even just like personal development, right, or areas that I wanted to pay attention to. I think that's really powerful. And acknowledging that. And if I don't have anything to show in those 5 years, then for someone like me, it's like, okay, then I do have some work to do. But more often than not, if there's somebody that's really consumed with achieving, they've probably done a hell of a lot more than they're giving themselves credit for in the last 5 years.
It's like, I don't know if you've read the book, The Gap and the Gain, but it's similar to that, where instead of always focusing on the gaps, on where you're not doing well, it's look at the gain. And just like what you said, if you look back on what you have accomplished thus far, you'll be way surprised, and you're not giving yourself. I mean, I think as an achiever myself, that it's hard sometimes to even give yourself acknowledgement for that, because you're on to the next thing, because you're like, okay, next, right? Like even when I run marathons, or when you like do something amazing, you're just like, okay, I've done that. Like, it's like a check for some reason. It's like a check that an achiever does to be like, it's done. And then tell me what's next. Where now I am more mindful and thoughtful about acknowledging what has been done and being present in the moment and celebrating that win. Like, I don't even think sometimes, because high achievers can be so forward thinking, that they don't even stop to even celebrate that win.
Yes. Yeah. I know I have another friend and colleague too, and she always asks, what are you doing to celebrate? What are you going to do to celebrate? And when she would ask me those questions originally, I would be like, what do you mean? And I would struggle with that too, in the sense of, is it okay to celebrate? Is then I'm being too egotistical, or I don't know, not being humble enough, or not being spiritual enough, or any kind of acknowledgement in those areas would often be a struggle too. And again, I think a lot of it is rooted in how somebody's raised, and maybe the culture or religious background or something like that they might have. Or for me, there was a strict level of humility. So I always felt like, oh, this isn't mine. I'm not responsible for this. I'm just kind of a vessel, which I can tap into that many times too, but it's got to be a balance where every now and then I'm like, well, not every vessel is built like this. I am working hard, full-time mechanic over here. But, so I think it's a balance of both for sure. And what you're saying too is having mentorship. I think that's a consistent thing I'm seeing with lots of people that I have on this podcast. And you mentioned it. You have mentors. I have mentors and coaches. We are mentors and coaches to other people. And I think it's really healthy to have people mirroring back to you too, because we can lose that, right? In the upside and the downside. So if we have people that need to help course correct us as we go along, or just take a minute and just acknowledge, how far we've come, or the impact we're making, or whatever we're set out to do, to be able to give us that healthy mirror. Because if we don't have that, the mind can really take hold and tell us a very different narrative than perhaps what reality is.
Oh, yes. I think a person has like 60,000 thoughts a day. The amount of self-talk that happens throughout a day, and the different voices that you hear and thoughts, and which ones you want to dim and which ones you want to, put out there.
Yeah. So did you feel like, somewhere along the 20 years that you were building your business, that you experienced burnout? Did you feel that you hit a wall?
Yes. There were probably several times during, right, the growing pains that everyone has in the different milestones that you have in your practice. When I was getting my first associate, when I was opening up, I'm a pediatric dentist, and now I also have an orthodontist. So when I brought her on, that was a huge burnout, because, right, we were building the ortho practice with our pediatric patients. And so that wasn't building up, as fast. And so there was just a lot of stress for the pediatric side to produce a lot in order to supply the orthodontic side. So that was like one growing pain. And then when we grew enough where then I needed a pediatric dental associate, that was another. So I think just each next level of how fast we were growing produced a different burnout, because it was deciding when was the right time to do it. And so there was those moments of, well, I know, I guess I have to do extra work because we don't have that next person yet. So you have to build the practice big enough to accommodate that next associate. And then that associate helps you grow. But, does that make sense? Where coming up with different parts where you knew how much more it was going to take out of you to get to that next level, or that whatever that next growth level that you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and shoving more and more in, like we've talked about, like the idea of being a high capacity woman. So when we're able to take on a lot, because not everybody is designed in that way where they can take on so much. But yeah, there's this like, I know that I'm a high capacity person, so I have to be really mindful of what I say yes to, even if it really excites me, because I've gotten better. I say no more often than yes these days, just as a way to protect my boundaries and honor my boundaries. But if there's so many exciting things happening, and I'm an excitable person too, right? So and I get really into stuff. And when I'm in the moment, it's like, yes, and I can feel myself get the charge from it, but then also go, how much more room do I have for this? And I think that is something too, depending on what kind of achiever personality you are, but even the idea of missing out on something. And I think, we all know now too, even though it's so counterintuitive, but the less you do, the more impact you have. And it's really hard to get super clear on that and just stay the course for a lot of people that are achiever types, because there is just so much, and to just pick one or two paths when you know that you can pick so many and you'd probably be decent at them, is you kind of have to grieve like the parts of you that aren't going to be realized, as far as like other projects or other ideas, or it's just not your time yet.
Right. It's sort of putting things in priority and really doing things now with more intention. Because Brandy, just like what you said, I have learned along the way to put those boundaries. And they were, of course, it's easy to go back and be like, okay, yes, I'm going to say yes to it because I am an activator. And when I hear ideas and it, like, you could feel the energy to like, oh my gosh, I so want to be a part of that. Right. When people, I love being around other like innovators and creative ideas. And then like you just jump on all of, you can feel the energy. And sometimes, well, now I have to be like, okay, is this in line with what I want, what I'm doing right now, right? So sometimes it's not a complete no, but maybe like not yet. Let me see, So I like to keep the door. I don't like to shut the doors all the way. In certain things where if you know that, or at least for me, I know that if I'm still thinking about an idea, even a few weeks later to something that I said no to, then there's something in there that I think I'll be able to make time for down the road, if that makes sense. And then if it doesn't come back to, if I say no and then it doesn't come back to me, then I know that I made the right decision.
Yeah. And, making quarterly goals, or even, I don't know, they have the different buckets, right? Like immediate, not right now, maybe someday, kind of distinguishing like priorities for the different ideas. And when you really have to label, and when I started labeling my projects, everything was like in the right now category. And I had to laugh because when I actually wrote it down, or actually it was on a spreadsheet actually, but when I was looking at the spreadsheet, I was like, oh my God, there's no way, because we house all of this stuff in our minds and it all feels very possible. But when you make a visual of it, you realize, oh, there's just no possible way. And even, I was just going to say, even this last year, I, knew I wanted to launch this podcast. I knew I wanted to launch my women's experience. And then there was something else I was launching at the same time. I totally forget what it is. But I mean, I had three things. It obviously must not be that important because I can't remember right now. But I tried to time them so they were happening at different times of the year. And they all happened at the exact same time because I didn't realize the amount of work it was going to take for each one of those things. And I thought I'd have the women's course done by like May, didn't launch till August. And it was happening at the same time as this. And there were days where I was just out of my head, and I was so out of my control because I was relying on other people to help me, and so I had contracted out some stuff that was getting done. And so no one was wrong and nothing bad happened. But we get into this idea of thinking we can control the timeline and not understanding the reality of that because we're new, right? It's our first time ever doing this stuff and we don't really have a clue. So I was like pretty compassionate and being kind with myself and kind of laughing at the insanity of it. But kind of what you and I touched on earlier too is even the fantasy of owning a dental business, right? Or a dental office. It's, you think in your head, you're like, can't be that hard. All these other people are doing it. And like, look at that guy. He owns a practice. He's nothing special. I can do it, and you talk yourself into thinking it's not that hard. And then you get into it and you're like, holy shit, what did I just sign up for? And then you feel way in over your head. So I would love to hear even from you some of the the soul crushing that happened once you got it, like the fantasy versus the reality, like the Pinterest dental office owner and the reality dental office owner.
Oh, yeah, I could give you lots. I mean, there were many, many times where I would be crying in my office in between patients because I had a baby that needed nursing, and I was also needing payroll done before the end of the day because I was still doing the payroll like with QuickBooks. And then like a parent needed me to call her because of a treatment plan. And then meanwhile, right, I'm doing all of that behind the scenes. And then as soon as you open the door and you go back out into the clinic floor, you have to put on this, "Hey, I'm Dr. Val. How you guys doing?" So that your team doesn't know what's going on. So it's all those things. And again, I don't know who put that in my head that's the way that you were that's what it's like to be a professional. I have to hide all the things. No one needs to know the behind the scenes of, oh my gosh, I just made payroll, at the very last second, and then I have my husband who's trying to put all of the envelopes together so that I can hand them out before the end of the day. Crying in my car. I mean, there's lots of crying. There's lots of tears for sure. And really finding, at the beginning, it was hard to find a community where I felt safe talking about this because there wasn't even a lot of women dentists when I first started in my area. And then I think at times when you only meet them, oftentimes that it's hard to really get into the nitty gritty of what it's like because, of course, in the beginning, you talk about all the great things that are happening. And then sometimes people don't have enough time to really be like, well, how are you really doing? Handling, having kids and just all the loans and, putting up all the credit cards, just trying to meet. And, it's just like moving money around to make things flow so that you could still pay your team, right? Like there's lots of behind the scenes that, probably my team have no idea what it was like back then. The second mortgages that you would take off your house so that you could, pay your team. Those are the things that I don't think people really talk about.
Yeah, I really appreciate your honesty and opening up about that. And that's something that, I'm committed to, and it sounds like you're committed to as well, too, is normalizing these kinds of conversations. Because you're exactly right. There's so much posturing in dental and this idea, the reputation management, right? And I mean, dentistry is built a lot on reputation. And so because if patients don't like you or your community doesn't like you, you're not going to have patients, right? So it's kind of this really tough situation where you got to present and look good constantly, externally, even though there's so much going on internally or behind the scenes. And then you go out, and I remember going to dental conferences early in my career, and I was just like, oh my God. It was like everyone's fish was bigger, one of those things. And you could just tell people were making up numbers, they were saying what they were doing each year, or, how this was going and that was going. And because of my sixth sense, I'm like reading right through it, like, I don't think so, or I might even be with some of my clients and standing side by side and watching them, fudge their numbers to other people I was like, that's not what your book said. But it was also it was sad at the same time because it was like feeling this need to impress. And, I was talking to a doctor recently at a conference I was at, and he's retired. I think, gosh, he might be late 70s or something. And we were talking about the inner competitiveness among dentists because he's a surgeon as well. And so he is in the, MD community quite a bit. And he's saying you don't have that in traditional medicine because you're all doing residency together and you all need to like rely on each other. And there's sort of this camaraderie about how you practice and you can shoot ideas off each other. And it's just not built in. He said in dentistry, it's very much built in where you're competing even in dental school. And so by the time you get out, you're actually competing with your fellow dentist, 10 miles away or up the street or down the block or something like that. And so that's also built in at this like subconscious level, is that you're competing with others in your own profession. And so that on top of competitive personality that you might have coming into it, And then the need to prove, like the achiever mentality, the debt you're coming in with. There's just so much tied into it. But I thought it was really insightful when he said that, because it's almost this idea to have a really strong reputation and compete with your fellows is instilled in you at the early, onset in dental school, which I thought was really fascinating. And that how medicine doesn't have that,
Yeah, I find that, and I find that so true, that there's definitely more of a camaraderie in the medical doctors, because they always had, even in residency, they collaborated so much. Whereas, yes, in the start of dental school, it was always a competitive nature.
Yeah. And you see that. I mean, there's almost this forced camaraderie, I think, sometimes now in dental, and people are trying to come more together. But I do think women tend to want to rely on each other a little bit more and feel there's more of a sisterhood in that space sometimes, because there is this unspoken burden that I know a lot of women in dental carry, particularly owner doctors and things like that. And like I was sharing with you, me being on the other side as a coach and consultant for so long, every woman that got on was always in tears. It was like, it was her safe space because she didn't have it anywhere else. And so it would just be the start of the call and just be like, oh, and exhale. And then the tears would come. And a lot of my calls was just being there for them and hearing what they were trying to say. And you're right, there was some heavy stuff. It was the mom guilt, the partner guilt. A lot of them were struggling with failed marriages, because they just had nothing left to give by the time they got home. And this drive to keep the business going. And that it was a struggle, it was really a struggle. So I appreciate you sharing about that, because I think it needs to be talked about more and more, just so women don't feel so alone, and men, don't feel so alone in the journey, and knowing that other people out there can relate, and there's resources too, like yourself, which I think is really awesome.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, the stress, it's challenging not to bring the stress home. Home for me was always my safe space. And so that's where I felt comfortable to be like, oh my gosh, what a day, And at the same time, of course, my kids and my husband sometimes got not the best of me, because you give so much and you give your best throughout the day to your team, to your patients. And then it's so exhausting that by the time you get home, you could be triggered and you're like, I just can't anymore, right? Or, if your kid does something and it's like nothing, but then it becomes something to you because you've just had it for the day. And so like, those are the moments where you're like, oh my gosh, I am so sorry that happened. Like, that's that guilt to be like, oh, like they are my why. And then those were those wake up calls. And I was just like, my family and my husband are my why. So why in the world would I give them the least of me, right? That's where it got real, like brutal, like an eye opener for me to be like, okay, I need to reevaluate what's going on here, because this is not who I want to be for them. So that's where like lots of changes started to occur over that time period.
Yeah, that's awesome. You're able to recognize that. And I think it's really incredible too at this, time in your career, even after you sold, you're still working in the business, but your commitment to helping other women not, feel the way you felt is really cool. You could definitely have hung up your hat and peaced out and, chill right off into the sunset, with, after the sale. I know you're still involved in the business, but you know what I mean. And so the fact that you're giving back and really trying to advocate for other women to have extraordinary lives is really, really cool. So hats off to you. I always love when people have that level of wanting to give back and share their story to inspire others is pretty rad. And so before we go, I am curious, like, what are you doing these days as ways to sort of explore your new identity? Are there any sort of activities or cool things you're finding out about yourself as you're in this stage of your life?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of different things that I'm working on, which I'm super excited about. I mean, I think as I'm learning that I'm not just a dentist, doing a couple of cool things. I'm working with my daughter, who is an entrepreneurship major at the College of Charleston. And she wanted me to share my story to her entrepreneurship class because, her professor invites all different kinds of business owners to share their story. And so I went in September. And these students are amazing. I can't imagine like how mature and how much they knew about business, because when I told them my story that I had never taken a business class before and, had no training whatsoever, and I just, winged it along the way. and reading a bunch of books, at nighttime, learning how to run a business and things like that. I loved being in that kind of in that arena, that I've created a course just for young entrepreneurs in their very beginning stages, not just in dentistry. So I was impressed that even 18, 19, 20-year-olds that were in this class, I asked how many of them are interested in starting their own business or have their own business. And more than half the class have already started their own business while they're in school. And yeah, so I've created a focus group where I have this online evergreen course that I put together for young entrepreneurs. And so I have a focus group that I'm running this by. I have 12 people in the class that will provide feedback. So I love that I can now kind of help mentor from the very beginning stages of how to make sure, that whole sustainability part, and really being true to yourself and making sure that along the journey that you don't forget about yourself. So I'm doing that. And then I'm really loving and not loving the fact that I have 4 kids, and I have 2 that are in college and 2 that are home, and just sort of seeing that I don't have an empty nest. There is this messy middle of where I am in my life that is beautiful and a heartache all at once, that I'm exploring sort of that concept of what it's like to be in this stage, because I think so many people want to be empty nesters without really embracing this season of their life. That's what I'm really excited about.
That is freaking awesome. That is so cool. I love that about the entrepreneurs too. You're just seeing it more and more. I mean, I know people have a hard time with America and stuff like that, but it is the land of opportunity, I know too. So it's cool to be an entrepreneur, and there's ways to sort of forge your own path here, which is pretty fun. And it's cool that young people are really getting involved. And I think that's one of the upsides, of technology and social media and stuff like that too, is younger folks are having access to a lot of tools to create, which is really, really neat. So I'm really glad that they have access to you. And I just think it's a beautiful full circle too, from how we started our conversation, that now your daughter, who was your practice baby, is bringing you into her class to say, hey, showing you off, So it looks like you did something right, even though you were stressed out, it looks like she really admires you and respects you and thinks you did a heck of a job. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I hope to have a business with her one day, whatever it is that she wants to do. So I'm looking forward to that. And I know she's super excited about building her own business, because it's great that entrepreneurship is even a major in some colleges, because it wasn't when I was in college.
Well, Dr. Valerie, you're awesome. Thank you so much for being on with me today. And I look forward to continuing to follow your journey and be rooting you on wholeheartedly from over here. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
You just listened to the Real Talk of Dental. If it hit, if it stung, if it made you feel just a little more human, good. That's the point. This isn't about fixing practices. It's about healing people. And if you're brave enough to show up real in this industry, you're my kind of leader. Subscribe, call in, send your wildest workplace confession. And most importantly, don't clean up for anyone. The mess, that's where the magic lives. We'll see you again on the next episode.